Good morning, everybody, and good evening to my friends in India. I come here with a hope and aspiration, which I carry from a lot of Indian rare disease patients, and I come with a kind of conviction that we will get what we want, we will achieve what we are looking for. You've got a marathon going on in Arlington right now. And I think we all over here in this room are also chasing and running a marathon. I think that marathon is what we are talking about, is the rare disease cure, which is still elusive to all of us. Every time we see that happening, we see a goal in front of us, we see an end point, and then suddenly it goes down further on. And we just continue to run and chase that elusive goal for us. What I'm going to be talking about is, yes, I'm going to be talking more about the disease which my daughter has been diagnosed with, but it will also give you an introduction. It will also give you a flavor of what rare disease is all about in India. Yeah. So, yes, we talk about, I'm from the Indian Rett Syndrome Foundation. We call our children as silent angels. And why we call them as silent angels, you will probably realize when I go through the presentation. We also find them to be very resilient, very strong in their approach. And that's what we will see in what I present to you today. So yes, I've been introduced into this world of rare disease through my daughter, who was diagnosed with various kinds of ailments to start with. And finally, I think like what Naveen said, even I got a diagnosis for her finally when she was 15. So till that time, we had all kinds of, diagnoses like cerebral palsy, global developmental delays, autism spectrum issues. So it was all, and then suddenly we came up with this a genetic test which came up and said, no, she's got Rett syndrome. And we found it to be just another label, changing from what was being diagnosed earlier, whatever diagnosis that we were being given earlier, to say now she's got Rett syndrome. But what it was, we couldn't really understand at that moment. And we couldn't understand that because all the clinicians, all the people that we were involved to get to this diagnosis continue to say there is no treatment which is available. So when we don't have a treatment, and you are telling me that she's got a genetic disorder, what do we do with that label which you're giving to us? And that is what got me involved into working out for several other children who were already either diagnosed or were misdiagnosed or were not diagnosed at all in the country, that we needed to work for them as well. And soon realized why this diagnosis that we have today has become very important for all of us. If we say, what is Rett syndrome? It's something where we talk about autism, cerebral palsy, Parkinson's, epilepsy, anxiety, all put together in a girl child. When I say a girl child, it's more prevalent in girls because it's an X-linked based mutation. So boys don't really survive or are severely affected with multiple disabilities. And in a girl child who can't talk. And that's why I relate it to say silent angels. So they're silent because they can't speak, but at the same time, they are very beautiful to look at. So when you look at them, they're very attractive and really pull up your attention. And that's why we call them as silent angels. The prevalence is quite high. Though in India, it's not been really, those studies have not been done to find out the incidence, but we know in the US, they say it's 1 in 10,000. And the prevalence is much higher than what we look at it from comparing it with some other diseases, common diseases like Huntington's and muscular dystrophy. So I will be talking a little bit about Rett syndrome. What are the causes that we see in these in this particular? It's a gene MECP2 which is mutated, which is on the X chromosome, which causes this particular disease. The the location of the gene is well identified. It's also, it's a gene which is the protein which is essential for neural control of the body functions. And as I said, it affects mostly girls. And we also know that the incidence is roughly about 1 in 10,000. But at the same time, it's a sporadic mutation. It's not inherited. So if you look at the kind of, we call it the iceberg theory, where what we see in these girls is only the tip of the iceberg in terms of the perception. What everyone sees is very different in terms of loss of spoken language. There's stereotypical hand movements, global developmental delays, intellectual impairment. But what we don't see, which is kind of hidden, and is the real reality, what these girls are going through, is very different. Where we see seizures, they experience a lot of seizures, QT, long, very QT intervals, irregular temperatures in their body, so the hands and feet turn cold or warm just sporadically. You don't know why is it happening. They have a lot of problems in digestion. The sleep hygiene is compromised, and they have scoliosis as well. They have issues in behavior where they'll start crying or screaming for no reason. They have bruxism, which is grinding of their teeth, rocking, the various moods that they go through. They have they are non-ambulatory, so they have issues in their walking, their apraxia, balancing, ataxic, dystonia. Of course, we also know that they have learning intellectual impairments in terms of learning disabilities and problems in their communication. But we also think that cognitively they're not as challenged. It's just that the expression is not there in them, because they understand things very well. When I'm talking to my daughter, even though she may not respond, but she can understand, she can comprehend what I'm talking about. And I think they are very smart and they're very clever to be able to understand and comprehend the kind of mood that I am with. Am I serious with her or am I joking? And that's what they can gauge very well, much better than what you and I can do as normal human beings. So their abilities are exceptionally well. In terms of treatment, we presently don't have any treatment, which is so-called approved, at least in India. So we are talking only about symptomatic management, which calls for a multidisciplinary approach. As I mentioned, they have multiple issues. So we need a lot of clinicians and specialists to be available for their management, the supportive care which is required by them. But yes, we also have hope, because there is a lot of research which is already happening. One drug has already been approved by FDA, and it's something which is for their overall development. But at the same time, there are also a lot of side effects which have been reported in the trials. So we are still very skeptical in terms of saying whether it's a good drug or not. But there are also a lot of gene therapy which is being tried upon. In fact, 2 patients have already been given gene therapy. The companies from US and the patients are based in Canada at the moment. So we are hopeful that things will improve and things are going to get on track very soon. So if you talk about us, we are a registered trust with parents, doctors, clinicians, and healthcare professionals who have all joined together. We have roughly about 400 families, 400 patients who are registered with us in this trust. And we do a lot of activities which are related to trying to improve the quality of life of the patient, of course, and the families who are linked up, or the caretakers who are linked with these patients. So if you look at the present priorities that we envisage for ourselves, it's about awareness, counseling, financial support with what these families need. They also need a lot of social support, medical issues which come up their way, of course, advocacy and policy, and the psychological support, what is essential for all the families and the patients themselves. If we talk individually about these, I think I'll just quickly run through this. We do a lot of these meetings where we call on experts and clinicians to guide these parents as to how we manage their overall conditions, provide them with research updates as to what's happening around the world, and what kind of hopes that we are looking in terms of finding a cure for this disease. How is the disease progression? And that's where I come back to say that today, if I have a clear diagnosis, I know how the disease is going to progress. I got a very late diagnosis, but if we are able to do that diagnosis quick enough, early enough, then we know how the different stages of progression are. And we can identify and say, you got to be careful in this stage, how the child could go bad, how things could go bad for your child. For example, we know in stage 3 of the disease, scoliosis starts setting in. So we forewarn the parents to say that, please be careful. This is the time when your child can get into an issue with the backbone. Please be careful and try and arrest it as soon as you do notice anything happening. So that's how it becomes very important in terms of sharing those experiences which have been documented, but at the same time, a lot of experience also which is coming in and playing over there to provide to different parents who are working together with you. Also, this awareness extends up to going to the hospitals, meeting up with the clinicians, making them aware. It's a rare disease. A lot of these clinicians have not had the exposure to have seen so many patients with rare diseases. How do they get to know that this is a patient, here we have a patient? So the misdiagnosis or the undiagnosis happens because of that, because they have not had the experience of seeing so many patients with rare disease. And that's what we do. We go to these hospitals. So it's a two-way process of doing that exchange, where the clinicians gets an opportunity to see so many patients with the specific rare disease. And at the same time, we also provide that opportunity for the parents to consult these clinicians and experts to be able to get an opportunity to get the treatment and the supportive care which is required for them. We also run these special clinics where the patients can go to the hospitals and get the kind of treatment whenever they require. And of course, have these meetings with the hospitals and clinicians into the specialty times that we have. Of course, diagnosis becomes a very critical thing. And that's what we do in terms of supporting the parents to know how do they go for diagnosis, where can they get the diagnosis done, what is the kind of test which is required for them. Another very important thing is planning for their future pregnancies. If for the high-risk patients that we have, a prenatal is required. How do they plan for that? So all those comes up as a part of our support services which we provide for the parents. Having said that, again, there is still a lot of challenges which we see along the way, which is the population is scattered all across the country. So how do we reach to them, or how do they reach to us? And that continues to be a challenge. We do have these programs running all across the country, but still, are we able to reach to everybody? Not really sure. And that's where the issue is, and that's what we're trying to see how we can bridge those gaps to include everybody. There is still a lot of apathy towards these girl children. They become a constant burden on the family in terms of the expenses which they have to incur for the medical expenses, because India does not have a very good, robust insurance policy which is running for these rare diseases, for genetic rare diseases. So they have to spend money from their pocket, and that is what causes that extra burden on them. Whereas a lot of these families are looking at a child to be a source of income in the future, whereas over here is a child which is a burden on the family in terms of the expenditure. So how do they manage that? How do they balance that? And that's what we are trying to support and try and see how we can, bridge. Again, it's bridging those requirements what we have. And of course, the engagement. How do we continue that engagement with the parents? Because we soon find a lot of the parents and a lot of the caretakers, they abandon the whole story and say, this is just a waste of time. There is no cure which is available for them. There is nothing that we can really do about it. So why do we, continue to do this, pursue this whole experience, or continue to go? So it kind of, they look at it from a more of a painful experience rather than from a positive experience that they should be looking at. And of course, for us, it's a cost for organizing these kind of events. One of the most essential, as I said, insurance is not available in India. So we need to provide them with medical support. And that's what we do in terms of fixing up the parents with the consultant, the experts to be available for them. And these experts are not only within the country, but also from outside the country. We do invite these experts to come in and have one-to-one discussions with them, guide them. How can they do things better for these children? Of course, we know there are going to be always emergency support, what is required. How do we make sure that during the emergencies, those requirements are fulfilled? So we have to be in touch with the doctors, with the hospitals, to be able to address those emergency needs which arises as and when it happens. And of course, we also need to have periodic reviews for these children and parents. So we need to be in constant touch with them. We need to provide them with updates on what's happening in research, what kind of medicines are we expecting, when are we expecting those to come, and what kind of cheaper options of medicines. When I'm saying they are generic medicines which are available. So when we want to mitigate the high burden of cost, we try and see if any alternatives are possible. So in line with the consultants and the clinicians that we have, we try and see how we can lower that burden of expenditure which is there on these families. Of course, rehabilitation becomes a very important part for them. So what kind of therapies are required for them? What kind of occupational physiotherapy, speech therapies can be involved into them? And we try and do this at their doorstep. We run a program where we are able to provide these services to these children who can't afford to, or where the family members cannot afford to leave their work because they're on daily wages. So how do they leave their family? How do they leave their daily work and go to the hospital or to the therapist to get the therapies done? So instead of their coming to the therapist, we try and provide the therapist to their houses. And that's what we try and do, so that at least the therapies can continue for these children.
Sorry to interrupt, Samir. You have 1 minute to complete the presentation. Then we will have more time during question and answers.
Okay, so maybe another 2 minutes. Okay, so just as again, there are equal number of challenges that we see in this area as well. I'll just quickly run through this. So counseling again becomes a very important thing, which is talking about the psychological support, what is required for the families, for the children, for the child, and for the family both, because the parents also need equal amount of support to be able to understand, to be able to provide that. A healthy mind is essential for providing that support, what is required for these children. I'll just go through this because so I'll straight away come up to the challenges here. Here we see a lot of burnouts which is happening in the families, where they say they abandoned the total program for treatment and for saying that, no, I think this is just a waste of time or waste of expenses and resources. And that's what we're trying to see. How do we figure that out? How do we try and bring them back on track to say that it's essential for them to continue the treatments what we require for these children? Acceptance. Many times we see that the parents don't accept the fact that there's a special child in their house. And that's because of the social stigma which is attached to some of these rare diseases. And they just refuse and say, we don't have a child like this. And how do we overcome that becomes a challenge for all of us. I think I'll skip this because I can just go on for talking about this, but so yeah, we also are doing a lot of advocacy work for the policy, for registration of the policy, for the advocacy in terms of getting the policy in the first place. And now we're talking about the refinement of the policy terms, which we see over there. How do we get insurance into this whole fold so that the burden can be shared by the insurance companies? We're also pushing up to see how the Orphan Drug Act, something similar can come up in India, because that's what is the call of the need at this point in time. Okay, so I think Harsha did mention this. I'm just trying to, kind of highlight the average cost that we see of clinical trials has gone up from 220 million in 2010 to about 504 million, which is an average growth of about 6% in the US. We also know that the median cost has gone up nearly about 15%. From 2010 to 2019. And even though the cost has gone up, India's contribution to the clinical trials is only about 4%. So why is it not happening, or what can we do to make it happen in India, is the heterogeneity. We know that there's a wide population of heterogeneous patients which is available, which is there in India, and we can tap them for the trials which is required. We also have this very large population of patients who have not gone under any clinical trials for the time being. There is a very specific exclusion clause that you see in any of the trials where they say that if you're a part of a trial, you cannot enroll for another one. So I think if that is the case, India does give that opportunity to have that untapped market so far for doing the trials. The regulatory reforms since 2014 have really been very supportive for conducting these trials in India. They have all kinds of new rules and regulations, which is making it, of course, they're being harmonized and synchronized with the regulations that we have across the world, but it's also making it much more transparent and time-bound approvals. The intellectual property rights have been strengthened up, so it's getting more and more strengthened up in terms of the laws which we need to control the piracy which is happening there. The government support is also there, where we have production-linked incentives to be provided to the production farmer units over there. And now they're also talking about research-linked incentive, which is going to directly link the orphan drugs, which is being developed within the country. We have 11 Center of Excellences across the country under the policy. We also have about an amount of US $600,000 to be provided for specific rare diseases in the country, being provided by the government. So the money is available. It's not that the government is there to support the patients, but the question is, where is the treatment which is still elusive? We have an excellent so-called clinical trials network, which is available there. The government is supporting with exemption of import custom duties. We have a strong infrastructure of hospital network, which is available right across the country. The number of investigators are also available to do the kind of research which is required. And we have the kind of starters which we need for all these research which is there. In the end, I would just like to say that we need to start developing, collaborating, being innovative with newer drugs to be available for these rare disease patients. It's imperative. We used to learn in school times to say necessity is the mother of invention. But here, it's not only a question of necessity, it's also a question of urgency, it's also a question of accessibility, and it's also a question of cost. What is the price at which that I'm going to get these drugs? And all these things need to be put together. And I think India does offer that opportunity to be able to do the kind of research, the kind of trials which is required in a collaborative manner, so that we are able to cater not only to the patients in India, but across the globe. Thank you very much.